Eric Shesky's Weekly You Demon. This Catholic dude abides. Culture, society, drinking, philosophy, religion, even politics. He's never out of his element. So sit back with a sarsaparilla and enjoy.
So I have this thing. It drives Marie nuts. I often have trouble getting back to sleep at night when I wake up like at 2 or 3 o'clock and I can't get back to sleep. So I started about 5 years ago listening to what I call soothing type voices. Usually, like Benedict Rochelle is my initial go-to guy, and I found a few others, Mother Angelica, for instance. And they usually talk about topics that mildly interest me, but not so much I get worked up. So here's what happens. You wake up in the middle of the night, can't get back to sleep, you throw in a podcast or some sort of lecture or something that mildly interests you, because let's face it, when you can't get back to sleep, it's normally because you're thinking about all the crap you have to do or something that's stressing you out. You need to get your mind off that, and that's easier said than done. And me, I can't do it if I don't have something else to latch my mind onto in the middle of the night. I find myself just obsessing about whatever's on my mind. So I plug in these podcasts, these lectures, and I listen to them. I find them mildly interesting, but not so interesting I get stimulated. And boom, I'm asleep. And it's worked like clockwork for me for 5 years now. You may want to give it a shot. I'll warn you though, and this is where it bugs Marie, it gets to be quite a crutch. And so you may find yourself having to do it when you go to bed at night. I go to bed, anywhere between 10:30 or so. And sometimes I can't get to sleep, so I'll put it in. Or I just enjoy listening to it. I like getting 5 minutes of a good Catholic thinker, not necessarily a Catholic thinker, just someone I find somewhat soothing, saying something interesting. I like getting that, one last bit of information to me before I go to bed. So Marie says, you have these podcast segments about noise and the need for inner silence, but yet you have these people chirping in your ear all night, and that's a fair criticism, so I'm going to warn you, it can become a crutch. But here's something I like about it. I think sometimes when you listen to those thinkers or, theologians or whatever you want to call them, when you listen to these people give their lectures, I think they stimulate thought in you. So last night I'm listening to Fulton Sheen. There's a bunch of Fulton Sheen lectures on Spotify. I mentioned this before. So last night I'm listening to these Fulton Sheen lectures. I was pretty hungover, so you ever had that hangover, your head's just pounding and you can't get back to sleep? Well, that's a good time for these podcasts as well. It's like, okay, just kind of listen to these podcasts and take your mind off the pounding headache. So I listened to Fulton Sheen last night. I guess I had too many gin and tonics. And I don't know what he said, but he has some penetrating insights. But I don't know if he said this and it triggered the thought, but it stuck with me, from like 4 in the morning until I woke up at 6:30. And his first thought in my mind, it was this: the life prayer, meditation. Why is that being recommended more and more? And again, I'm not sure this is Fulton Sheen or something that came to me from listening to Fulton Sheen. I mean, I think it's safe to say from the 1960s onward, we've had I'm going to call it a mindfulness revolution, over the past 50 years. I think in the 1950s, people who practiced prayer or meditation, contemplation, mindfulness techniques, whatever, that was pretty much just reserved for religious people. Thomas Merton at the monastery, and Catholics who understood the spiritual tradition. But Americans and people in the West in general, they just didn't do that type of thing. And that started picking up steam, though. You had the Beatles going, consulting with a Hindu and Eastern religions, and people started realizing, no, there's a lot of that in our own Christian tradition. And then at some point, I don't know, 70s, 80s, 90s, you had this like a secular version of mindfulness where psychologists are pointing out, you don't have to be religious. It's just a good thing to engage in meditation. It's like those Jedi scenes in Star Wars where the Jedi stand there in the morning sun or whatever, meditating. I think everyone acknowledges now that some sort of mental exercise every day is good for you. Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winning economist, does a lot of psychological studies on decision making. He wrote one time that I can imagine a future where people mentally exercise for 20 to 30 minutes a day, just like they physically exercise today for 20 to 30 minutes a day. He said it is that important. And for some reason it hit me, why does it work? And I've been listening to these various lectures on mindfulness, and they talk about how, when you're engaged in meditation, basically you're detaching yourself from time and space. You're just trying to live in the moment through your meditational practices. And we know from neurological studies that it makes your neurons fire on all cylinders or something like that. I'm just not much into science. People ask me sometimes, Shesky, man, you just know a ton of stuff about philosophy, religion, history, biography. It's just like, how do you know so much stuff? And it's just like, because I'm absolutely freaking ignorant in a lot of other things. All the STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. But I started asking myself, why are these mental exercises effective? Why is detaching yourself from time and space effective? Why does it let your neurons fire in all cylinders, things like that? Why does that work? I don't know. But here's the theory. It works because we're spiritual beings. Let's face it. Brains, physical, matter, everything we know exists in time and space. Those are crucial terms to understand, primarily because we can't understand them. But we exist in time and space. Everything we measure is time and space. Anything that is outside time and space is necessarily spiritual. We're a combination of spirit and matter. Space and time is for the matter. Spirit's for things that transcend the matter. Spirit transcends space and time. In the mental exercises, you're detaching yourself from space and time and getting in contact with the spiritual side. That allows the spiritual and the material to interact better, to make your neurons all fire properly. And again, neurons firing properly is not the right term, but that's what I'm taking away from these various lectures. So again, it's if we didn't have a spiritual side to us, the mental exercises that everyone, including staunch atheists, are admitting now are pretty important to a healthy lifestyle. Actually doing meditation 10, 20, 30 minutes a day. If we didn't have the spiritual side, those things simply wouldn't work. If you listen to any of these mindfulness type practices, they always talk about, shut down your mind, feel yourself transcending space, transcending time. They're just soaked with this whole idea of getting outside your body type stuff. The question is why? Why are we trying to get outside time and space? And my theory is it's because that's where we contact the spiritual and we make the spiritual more healthy, which then benefits its interaction with the body. And by the way, apparently to get the benefits of like mindfulness type practice and meditation, 12 minutes a day, they say is a minimum. That's when they start seeing the mind imaging, having positive results 12 minutes a day. That's nothing. So it's like if you say you're too busy to do 12 minutes a day, you gotta go back to the old Buddhist proverb or anecdote where a novice goes to his master and the master says, meditate for half an hour a day. And this novice said, I don't have time. I don't have time to meditate for half an hour a day. And the master says, then make it an hour. You just want to be fascinated and bummed out at the same time? Go listen to the May 9th podcast by Joe Rogan with a guy named James Metzl or Jamie Metzl. He's like a futurist. And he's talking basically about genetic engineering. And it's going to blow your mind. Again, it's going to bum you out too. The gist of it is that right now, genetic engineering is just like outstripping by far anything we can get our heads around ethically or morally. I think the Catholic Church could. Okay. And I think that's maybe the reason why we need something like the Catholic Church, and I might get to that later at the end of the segment, but he's just going through just all sorts of things that we're doing with genetic engineering. Joe Rogan said, like, how close are we having, genetically engineering people with 4 arms? And he goes, it's coming. Because that's probably way, way down the road yet. But with technology doubling like every year, I mean, way down the road, it might be 20 years. Now, I think he said probably 50 to 100 years before we're there yet. But he said this, he goes, the implication of what's going on is absolutely remarkable. He goes, and we're probably going to first see it, the stuff that's really going to freak people out, is going to be predictive genetics. And here's basically how predictive genetics works. It works in different levels. One, and this is coming pretty soon, after you give birth to a baby, they're going to look at his DNA, his genetics, whatever it is, and as I've explained in other podcasts, I'm not very good with science, to say the least. But they're going to be able to tell the parent when they walk out, by the way, in 50 years, your son is probably going to come down with Alzheimer's. He has a greatly increased risk of Alzheimer's, and it's just in the genes. Or, this kid's going to be a world-class athlete. We can tell from his genes that, yes, he should be in the Olympics by the time he's age 20. And the question becomes, what's that do to a parent's outlook with this child? Does a kid get to have a regular childhood when the parents know all this? And, that's a serious issue. Yeah, but it gets a lot freaking worse. You have a situation now where we're not far away from just choosing kids. So you go to the egg store, the sperm store, and say, I want that egg with that sperm, I want these things combined, and test tube babies, and you can just grow the kid to your liking. You can actually pick out a super kid. What's worse is those kids will be immune from diseases, retardation, etc., etc. And you could get the situation just like we have today with parents who don't want to get their kids inoculated. He goes, you get the same situation here, that if you are having kids through sex, that you're looked at as irresponsible to society because you're putting kids out there who are susceptible to measles, smallpox, whatever it is, and that you're basically a bad person and you are a risk to society by not getting your kid, at the gene store. Oh, immunized, by the way, not inoculated. We revile people who don't get their kids immunized as saying you're creating a risk for society at large. So these are going to be big issues coming down the pike. What's even worse is you got China loves this stuff. And China has no moral or ethical base. Mao and the communists destroyed it. They don't know right from wrong. They don't care. Yes, I do believe in natural law. I do think something is written on their hearts. But they have no tradition they're building on. No moral or ethical norms from Confucius or Lao Tzu or anything like that. And they are just going full steam ahead with this stuff. So we're going to have a situation where we say, well, wait, we're really against that type of genetic engineering. It's just immoral to be farming kids like this. And the Chinese be like, do what you want. But when it comes to the Olympics, we're kicking your ass. Oh, and by the way, when it comes to war, our people are going to be that much stronger in the trenches. 10 times stronger. We're going to kick your ass there. And we're going to be a lot smarter than you, so we're going to outstrip you in technology in no time flat. Now, right now, we're light years ahead of China. But because they're amoral, they're going to start closing that gap fast with these superhumans they're going to start creating. And they lay it all out in the Joe Rogan podcast. Again, it's freaky. It'll bum me out. It's fascinating. I guess I'm glad I'm in my 50s. I'm not getting around to see it. Probably my kids won't either. But boy, my grandkids, they got a tough road to hoe. And for my Catholic or non-Catholic listeners out there, go back and read Paul VI's encyclical Humanae Vitae from 1966 or 67, where he basically said, no, contraception is wrong. If you separate the procreative from the recreative aspect of sex, banging your wife, getting her pregnant, if you separate those two things, you're going to get rampant perversity. I read this encyclical, by the way, back in the late 1980s. I wasn't Catholic, wasn't even considering becoming Catholic. I read this encyclical, my jaw hit the floor. I'm 23, 24 years old. I'm just like, what the frick? This guy called it. The sexual revolution, homosexuality, divorce, he freaking called it to a cotton-picking T and laid out exactly how it was going to transpire. I don't think he got to genetic engineering because I don't think he knew about it. But a lot follows. So now we're just basically saying, well, before we wanted to have sex and have fun having sex without having the impact of having a kid. That was kind of the fun part. And now this is like the other side of the coin. Now we want to start having the kid without having the sex period. And now you're going to start really, really reaping the problems of ignoring the Catholic Church's Humanae Vitae. Now, I appreciate with my non-Catholic listeners, that might seem extreme. That's fine. It's a very, very short encyclical. You can read it in probably an hour and a half, maybe 45 minutes. Go read it. Sit down in your office or in your study, close the door, sit down and read that mofo. I think you're going to be pretty amazed. And you might be thinking, wow, the Catholic Church might be, might be the only answer here. We have no moral arbiter. And I am 100% aware that is just a laughable, probably quixotic notion I have. But I don't see any other answer. This Jamie Metzel, he's like a leftist, I can tell. A cool one. I think pretty cool. I like him. But he's like talking about the UN, taking care of this. And I'm just like, man, I just don't see it. He's trying to ring the alarm bells and try and get people involved, which it's gotta be a good thing. The more people that realize this problem's out there, the better. But, go check out that podcast. It'll probably the most fascinating podcast I've heard of the year, even though it completely bummed me out. Alright, let's crank out some lightning segments. Drinking some straight gin on the rocks. Special occasion. Because I want to. I'm actually cracked open a bottle of the Botanist. A high quality gin my partner got me for Christmas. I finally cracked it open and drinking it straight so I can really appreciate the gin and juniper flavor. No, it's pretty good. I'm on this crash diet, trying to drop 20 pounds. I'm almost there. Once I get down to 180, I'm going to go on a sane diet. But right now I'm just trying to crash down to 180. I'm around 182, 185, depending how much I eat the day before. But when you drink gin, or anything for that matter, but I like drinking gin like this because it goes straight to your head. It's almost as good as soaking a tampon in grain alcohol and shoving it up your rectum. I'm just kidding. I don't do that anymore. Not since this morning. So I have this Spotify playlist. I call it Off the Beaten Track. It's like 250 songs. Whenever I hear a song I like, I'm not sure where to shove it, I shove it on there. And I have maybe a half dozen Three Dog Night songs. By the way, if you weren't aware of this, the band Three Dog Night, great band, by the way, from the early 70s, it's named after a cold night in Canada. That's how many dogs you need in bed with you in a cold night in Canada, 3 dogs. So if it's a 3 dog night, it's really cold. True story from what I hear. So I'm listening to this Spotify playlist, and I have like 6 Three Dog Night songs out of 250. And like 6 songs in a row, 5 of them were Three Dog Night. It's like, what the frick is going on? I didn't mind, because I like him, obviously. But it reminded me of this great Chuck Negron story. Chuck Negron was the lead singer from Three Dog Night. Just a legendary partier. I think also a heroin addict. But before like the 1973 Rose Bowl parade, he just got absolutely freaking trashed and stayed up all night. He was so trashed next morning that he was supposed to perform in the parade. They stand on a float singing, Jeremiah was a bullfrog or whatever. He was so trashed they had to duct tape him to the float so he wouldn't fall off. Kind of reminds me, a couple years ago, my small town brought in this musical group, and my small town has a tradition of bringing in really good bands for a town its size. I mean, they brought in I think the Kingston Trio once. They brought in the Band America, which is just a phenomenal hour-and-a-half concert. The Lettermen. Again, I realize these aren't exactly household names, especially for people in the 20s, but they are names. Been pretty big name recording artists at some point in their career, and they come to my small town. One time they brought in this band, I can't remember what they're called, but their whole theme was, "We Were There." And basically they were backup singers and backup guitarists and drummers for big names. And I couldn't tell you who they were, but I know Cat Stevens was one of them. They're like, we're going to tell you the stories of what it was like to be touring with these guys back in the 60s and early 70s. And I'm like, oh, freaking sweet. You get to hear about Jim Morrison in a 5-summer. stuff like that. And it was, I mean, the music was fun, great music, and the stories are okay, but they were just so sanitized and lame. Yeah, the one that I remember was like, and then after one concert, we were sitting around a campfire, and Cat Stevens took out his guitar and started playing a new song he'd wrote, and that became Peace Train. Then they kick into Peace Train. But I mean, there's nothing about drinking, drugs, sex. There's barely rock and roll in these stories. They're just so cut and pick and lame. Again, I was glad I went. The stories were mildly entertaining, interesting, and the music was very good. Last Saturday, I worked all morning. Then I had to go to a neighboring town about 40 miles away for Meg's cross-country track meet. And I had to back to the office and work from like 4 to 6. And then came home and started drinking. And then took my mom out for Mother's Day dinner. And I had a couple of gin and tonics, stiff ones. And I'm driving out to this restaurant, or riding out. I had Marie drive. And I'm just like, damn, I like drinking. Just had an awful week at the office. Awful week with extracurricular activities and obligations. And I'm just like, man, I really, really, really like to drink. And I guess it's one of those thankfulness things, from the Virgin Eye. Thankfulness expands your inner vision. Well, drinking lets me feel more thankful, and maybe that expands my inner vision. Podcast recommendation. If you're Catholic and you like devout stuff, but from guys who are halfway cool, check out From the Friars. That's what's called, From the Friars. Friars. It's not like French friars. It's friars as in monks. These are the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal. This is Benedict Rochelle's group. I believe he was the founder. Longtime readers of my blog, listeners to this podcast know I'm a big-time fan of Benedict Rochelle. We actually had some correspondence when I was editing a Catholic magazine. He wrote me one time with some observations. I'm a little mad at him. I got a personal issue I'm dealing with, and don't worry, nothing that affects the podcast, but really needed some intercessory help, so I thought, well, Benedict Rochelle, if anyone is a saint who I knew, it's gotta be him. So I asked him to intercede and help with this special petition I have, and I got skunked. So, have you ever heard of a mushi? My two oldest sons, Alex and Jack, are down in Mexico, and they're freaking way down in Mexico. They can't be more than like 2 or 3 hours from Guatemala, and they're spending a month down there in immersion school, where all they do is learn Spanish. And by the way, they've been there 3 weeks now. And my son Alex has a major in Spanish, a degree in Spanish, a bachelor's degree in Spanish from University of Michigan. He is just thoroughly convinced, higher education in the United States is just a freaking scam. He says he's been down there in 3 weeks, doing everything in Spanish. He thinks he has gotten better in Spanish in 3 weeks than he did in 4 years of language course at U of M. Maybe that impugns Michigan's foreign language arts, I don't know. But he says it's just this unbelievable how good their Spanish is getting down there. But Jack was out playing basketball with a bunch of, he's got some 8th, 9th, 10th graders in the local playground, so he went out there playing basketball with them, and it was actually pretty good. They're going at it pretty hard. And everything was chingada, mushi, the guys calling him mushi this, mushi that, and chingada is the F word, and finally Jack's just what's a mushi? Well, he went back and asked his house mother, the woman he's staying with. He asked her that, and she just kind of laughed, and she goes, it's just disgusting. It's a culture here in Oaxaca there that basically, when the men, and I use that term extraordinarily loosely, when the men turn 18, they declare that they're now women, and they're getting dressed like women, act like women, and they're flaming homosexuals. And she goes, it's just disgusting. And she goes, yeah, those street kids that you're playing basketball with, yeah, mushi is that's our equivalent of saying, hey, faggot this, faggot that. But it's like Jack says, it's just a little bit more accent to it. It's that much more degrading. You're mushi. So he's next day or 2 days later, he's back in college here in this emergent culture class, and the professor starts going on and on about how the mushi culture is traditional and highly revered and respected among people in southern Mexico. And Jack is standing there just like, you're either freaking delusional or you're just a flat out liar. And he goes, he really likes her. In person, I really like this professor. But he goes, everyone we're talking to on the streets, at our home down here, we're just talking about how these people are just reviled. It's just kind of funny. Well, just a couple education notes here to wrap up. I don't know if you guys saw it, but I guess at some Ivy League schools and some other elite schools, there's a software program that allows seniors to hook up before they graduate. I guess you put down someone's name or multiple names if you're a gigolo or a whore that you've been wanting to hook up with during college for the past 4 years. And then the software program goes through and confidentially matches up the names. Pretty disgusting. I guess if you're a decadent, it's pretty cool. Fantasies come true and all that. But it has a glitch. They said there some kids, seniors are calling, whoever's in charge of it is calling up and complaining and saying there must be a glitch in the program or something because no one put them down. I can't believe it. Hats off to the Detroit Diocese. I don't know if you saw it or not, but they have banned athletic events on Sundays. Hallelujah to that. When I was a kid, and I know I'm sounding like my, parents who walk, 10 miles uphill both ways to school in the morning, but when I was a kid, Wednesday nights in my town, there were no athletic events. That was reserved for religion education. And then Sundays, it was just understood. You just don't have athletic events. And man, that started breaking down. Wednesdays were gone, I think, by the time I graduated from high school. But then increasingly, Sundays are infiltrated upon. Heck, they even infiltrate on, like Easter. I mean, Ash Wednesday one day, my kid, I'm going to pick up my kid at tennis practice, and his coach is a licensed minister, and a good man. I like him. And I was like, hey, I gotta get him out of here. It's Ash Wednesday. He's like, well, so what? It's like, he didn't say that, but he's just like, fine. I mean, yeah, you're a friend of mine, and if you want to take him, go ahead and take him. But I'm totally baffled as to why you'd want to take your kid out tennis practice to go to Ash Wednesday Mass. Perhaps my favorite Reddit tweet of the week was this. It was that villain from The Incredibles, and it said, "If everyone has a bachelor's degree, no one has a bachelor's degree." And I love that. If you find that funny, you're probably on the side that agrees with me that says college education isn't really an education anymore. It's more of an experience. It's more of a piece of paper. It's a credential. A dumbass credential. Doesn't mean anything credential, but a credential nonetheless because our culture, our society, and businesses and government tell us it's a credential you need to have. But it doesn't mean, it doesn't mean anything. But then you have people who are still, wrapped in the 1940s and 50s who think the 4-year degree really means something. Now, if you really think you're getting an education during those 4 years, like a meaningful education, not one that you could just get on your own with work experience and a good library card and the internet, if you think I should get an education, you probably don't find that very funny, but that's probably the big divide in America today when it comes to education. Does higher education really mean anything substantively in the sense of knowledge? Or is this kind of a farce to have fun and get the experience and have a lot of sex and drink a lot of beer? Okay, that's a wrap for the week. Go check out the Facebook page, subscribe to the Twitter feed, tell your friends and family. Go to Demon Podcast for show notes and other information. As always, thanks for listening.